Hi Year 5, so this week we're looking at fractions, decimals and percentages again. And to begin with, for day one of your maths, you are going to be converting fractions, decimals and percentages. So I'm just going to show you an example of each of those now. So here we've got the fraction 1/10. And we should remember that when we're looking at decimals, after the ones column, we've got our decimal point, then we've got our tenths column, our hundredths column, and then our thousandths column. So if we have got 1/10, that means that there are no holes. And in this tenths column here, the numerator is going to tell you how many there are. So it just says 1/10. So 1/10 as a fraction is the same as writing as a decimal as 0.1. Now, to convert this to a percentage, we should remember that percentages are out of 100 because it's per cent, and cent means 100. You can see here that actually our fraction is not out of 100, but we can do something to make that into 100, and our decimal is out of tenths at the minute. So I know that in order to convert this fraction 1/10 to 100th, I'm going to have to make my denominator 100, and in order to do that I'm going to times by 10. Now remember, whatever you do to the denominator you have to do to the numerator, so I also need to multiply 1 by 10, which gives me 10 hundredths, or 10 out of 100. Now if we go back to our percentage, we know that it's out of 100, so 1/10, which we've converted into hundredths, is the same as 10 out of 100, so this would be 10%. That's your first example. Okay, so the next example we're going to work through is we're going to start with a decimal here. Now you'll notice that comparing this to 0.1, 0.21 has 2 decimal places, and remember, decimal place means how many digits there are after the decimal point, okay? So 0.21, we already know that this is 21 hundredths if we're looking at our place values at the top here, 21 hundredths. So if we go back to a fraction, we know that this would be 21 out of 100. And this one's nice and easy for us to convert to a percentage because unlike the first one, it's already out of 100. So this is simply 21%. The last example we're looking at here, we're starting with a percentage, 64%. Now we already know that percentages are out of 100. So if we go back to our fraction, we know that this is going to be 64 out of 100. And if we look at our example above, I said that this decimal here was 21 hundredths because that 1 falls into the hundredth column. Now, here we know we've got 64 out of 100, so it would be 64 hundredths. So we write that, we've got no holes, and 64 hundredths. Okay, so day 2 maths, after your starter questions, you are going to be given a variety of fractions, decimals and percentages, and you need to order and compare them. So this builds on your skills from day 1. So if we are ordering and comparing fractions, decimals and percentages, it's good to change them all to 1 unit of measurement. So I'm going to change them all to fractions, and then I'm going to order and compare them. So remember, from day 1, a percentage is out of 100. So I'm going to leave this one here because I can see that's already out of 100, and I'm going to change this percentage into a fraction. So this now becomes 42 out of 100 because percentages are out of 100. This one stays the same, so we're just going to bring that one down. 63 out of 100. And here, 0.89, we know that using place value, this is our holes column, our ones, so we've got no ones. Our decimal point, then we've got our tenths and our hundredths. So our last digit lies in the hundredths column. So this we can convert into hundredths, whereby it is 89 out of 100. Now, depending on what the question says, whether you need to order it in ascending order or descending order, then you go and order them. You can see now that you can order them because they are all out of 100, and so that means that we can compare them. So I'm going to order them in ascending order, which starts from the smallest. So I've got 89 hundredths, 42 hundredths, and 63 hundredths. Well, I know that if I had 100 square, 42 would be the least amount shaded in. So that becomes my first number, okay? So that's the smallest. So I'm going to put my sign in there. Then I'm going to look for the middle number. So I've done this one now. We can tick it off. So now I'm looking at 63 hundredths or 89 hundredths. Well, I know that 63 is smaller than 89. So the next in line would be 63 hundredths. And then last but not least, 89 hundredths. Now, if you wanted to progress that further, you could leave the answer in the units that you started with. So I know that 42 hundredths came from here. So this was actually 42%. 63 hundredths was 63 hundredths to begin with. And 89 hundredths was 0.89. That's just the last step if you want to, but it's fine to leave it like this as well. So our next example, we have got a decimal, a fraction, and a percentage again. And once again, I'm going to change these all into fractions. You don't have to do it into fractions, but that's how I'm going to show you how to do it. So this one's going to stay as it is because it's already a fraction. 12 hundredths. Okay. Now, here, this percentage here is 8%. So that's 8 out of 100. So we just write 8 out of 100. And then here, we've got 0.04. Now, you need to be careful here because you haven't got any tenths. So this is simply 4 hundredths. If we had a 1 here, it would then be 14 hundredths. But because there's nothing in the tenths column, we've just got 4 hundredths here. Now we can order and compare them like we did before. This time I'm going to order them in descending order. So I'm going to start with the largest fraction. So we're comparing 4 hundredths, 12 hundredths, and 8 hundredths. Now I know that 12 is the largest there, so I'm going to start with that. 12 hundredths. And you can see that my symbol has changed sign now, okay? So changed side, sorry. So we're saying that 12 hundredths is greater than whatever my next number is going to be here. So we've done this one. Now we're comparing 4 hundredths and 8 hundredths. I know that 8 is bigger than 4. 8 hundredths is greater than 4 hundredths, our last and final fraction. And remember the challenge that I said, you can leave your answer with the original numbers. So 12 hundredths was 12 hundredths. 8 hundredths was originally 8%. And 4 hundredths was originally 0.04. So this last one here is an example of one of the challenge questions right at the bottom of day 2. And it's a bit trickier, but we can still do this one. So here we've got 2/5, 0.04, a quarter, and 21%. So again, I'm going to convert them all to fractions. I know I'm going to choose the ones that I can do easily to begin with. So I know that 21% is out of 100. So this straight away becomes 21 out of 100. I know that then I can do this one. This is one that we've had in a previous question. We haven't got any ones or wholes. Decimal point, no tenths, just 4 hundredths. So this would be 4 out of 100. Okay, now using my knowledge of fractions, a quarter, I know that a quarter of 100 is 25. So a quarter of 100 would be 25 hundredths. That's the same as a quarter to begin with. Now this one is a bit trickier because we need to make our denominator 100. So, first things first, you need to change your denominator to 100. And then I'm going to think to myself, right, how do I get from 5 to 100 by multiplying? Well, I know that to get from 5 to 100, I need to multiply by 20. So if I multiply by 20 to get 100 as my denominator, I then need to do the same to the top. Multiply by 20 to get my numerator. 2 times 20 is 40 out of 100, okay? So now I've got all of my original numbers out of 100 and I can order them. I'm going to order them in ascending order again. So going back from smallest to biggest. So I can see I've got 40 hundredths, 4 hundredths, 25 hundredths and 21 hundredths. So this number here, 4 hundredths, is my smallest. So that goes at the start. Smallest, okay? So we're going to say 4 hundredths is less than whatever my next number is. So then we've got 40 hundredths, 25 hundredths and 21 hundredths. Well, 21 hundredths is the next smallest there. 21 hundredths is less than 25 hundredths. And 25 hundredths is less than our last fraction, 40 hundredths. Now remember, as a challenge, we can leave it as the original numbers here. So 4 hundredths was 0.04. Then 21 hundredths was 21%. 25 hundredths was a quarter. And 40 hundredths was 2/5.